But right now, my guest is Dr. Grace, and she is our East Coast correspondent, and she is the host of American Heartland, Dr. Grace. It originates out of North Carolina, but heard from coast to coast, live stream on the internet, huge audience. She's also the editor of the culture and politics section of the World Tribune. She has been a correspondent to Freedom Friday for years, out of Washington, D.C., Boston, and the East Coast. Dr. Grace, thank you for being with us. And let me ask you, are there any solutions coming from anywhere concerning this immigration crisis? What are you hearing?
Well, there sure are, Carl, and really there's two legs of this problem. One is, and Senator Ted Cruz has gone around saying that we have to stem the flow, and the only way to stem the flow is we have to reverse the president's granting of amnesty to those who are, minors. So that's one way to try to prevent this influx. But another question that we face is, what do we do with those children who are already here?
Right.
And this week, I was in touch with one of my great friends from Washington, D.C. He's a retired Marine Corps lieutenant colonel. I'm going to be interviewing him in full on my broadcast tomorrow. But he's floating around a really important proposal. He has been on 5 border commissions, so he has testified many times before Congress. His latest proposal is very simple. He said that right now, once we apprehend these minors, what we should simply do is we return them to the embassies of their respective countries. He said the solution is so simple that it's staggering. We apprehend these kids, and we simply ask them, what country are you from? Oh, Honduras? Okay. We go to the embassy of Honduras, and we say, here, we have found one of your nationals. Deal with it. And this is a solution that satisfies 2 essential requirements. Number one, it's very humanitarian, because we're going to try to get these children returned to their families, to their parents, and they're going to be in the hands of the embassy. So that this solution is beautiful for 2 reasons. Number one is it's humanitarian. It's one of the most humanitarian solutions you can think of, because we're going to return them in the hands of their country and say, look, you've got to unite this child with his or her parents and his or her family back in their country.
Right.
And number 2, it is the most cost-effective solution for Americans, because ultimately we're going to tell these embassies and these countries, this is not our problem. And this is not going to be at our expense. This is all going to be done at your expense.
Right.
And if you can imagine for one moment, Carl, if we have hundreds of these kids being delivered to all of these embassies, then the embassy is going to put pressure on their home country and say, listen, you've got to stop this outgoing flow, because it's going to be very expensive to keep flying these folks back and to house them, feed them, and clothe them and send them back, whatever amount of time that takes. And Colonel Peterson is very fierce on this point. He says that if an embassy then fails to comply, then we're going to see that as a hostile act.
Right.
And we're going to take measures against that country that is not cooperating to help us solve the crisis.
Well, not only that, Dr. Grace, but I imagine that we probably send humanitarian funds or assistance funds and aid to these countries. So we send them the bill. If they don't pay the bill, then we just withhold the funds and the amount of the bill that they owe until they stop.
You are 100% right. And I got to tell you this, Carl. In my many years in Washington, D.C., I was hosted, I was wined and dined at these embassies. These embassies are beautiful. They are gorgeous.
Right.
They have state-of-the-art everything you can imagine.
Right.
They are extremely well-funded. So I asked this question. When we capture one of these, why should even 1 penny of American tax dollars go towards trying to solve a crisis and a problem that is not ours in the making?
Right.
So I think the solution is brilliant. One of the counter-arguments is, maybe the embassies wouldn't have enough room for all those coming in. But ultimately, it's their problem, and they're going to have to find a solution at their expense, period.
Right. Right.
Instead, we're having the opposite. is becoming our problem, and it's on our dime. And that doesn't make any sense at all.
Right. So you secure the borders, you enforce the laws we already have, you send these kids back to the embassies of the countries from which they came, you bill those countries. If they don't pay the bill, then you withhold any funding that we have flowing in or any goods, materials, supplies in the amount of what they owe us until they stop. And there's a good start. There's a good start.
That's a great start. And you know what's amazing to me, Carl, is that he's floating this proposal, and he's going to be talking to all kinds of folks up on the Hill. You have Republicans now in closed-door sessions asking themselves, what should be our strategy? What should we do? The solution is very simple. It's so simple. It's brilliant in its simplicity. It's right there. We have the courage to do it. And I think Americans like this kind of common sense, simple solution. Instead, what do we have? We have our government picking up these kids at our expense, sending them all across the country, including they want to send them now here in Massachusetts. They want to send them miles and miles away from the border. And then we're going to have to, for example, there's talk about a facility in Cape Cod or some malls across Massachusetts, old malls that haven't been used. And at the state's expense and at the federal government's expense, they basically want to say, we want to house them in these locations, and then it's going to take years to process their claims throughout the courts, by which time they will simply vanish in the vast underground economy.
Right.
So what's going on in this state is tomorrow we're having a huge rally, and I mean huge. In fact, it's even been announced on Rush Limbaugh's show. We had some callers from Massachusetts. Some cities here are being completely overwhelmed by illegals, and they let it be known on Limbaugh's show that there's a big rally taking place in Massachusetts tomorrow. And we're hoping with that additional advertisement and also all the press we're doing on shows like yours and mine and others that have collaborated in getting the word out, we want maximum attention on this rally, because if we can get the governor to back down, it's going to send a clear message to Washington, D.C., don't mess with the people, because we will rise up.
Right.
And we also have to take a stand, and as soon as possible, because the president's ideas and policies are getting worse by the second.
Yes, they are. Tell the folks, and I guess you're referring to what his proposal is for going into Honduras and receiving the kids there.
Yeah, what he's suggesting, he's floating it, and this is outraging so many members of Congress that some are saying that they're going to possibly impeach him if he tries to go down this road, which is he's suggesting that instead of having these kids do the long, dangerous trek across Latin America and through Mexico to come to our border, that they should simply apply for a refugee status right there in the host country, and we're going to expedite the process from Honduras, and we're going to fly them in so they don't even have to cross the border. They would just be flown right in.
Right.
And by the tens of thousands. And he's trying to argue that this is going to stop the flow on our border.
Right.
But that's nonsense, because the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to have the flow is going to continue, and all kinds of people who are afraid of the dangers of, sending their kids throughout all that dangerous territory are going to say, you know what? We're just going to take alternative plan B.
Well, of
We're
course.
Just going to apply right here.
Of
so you're
course.
going to double or triple the influx,
Sure.
not curtail it.
Sure. And you're going to have all the Me Too's. Once they see this going, there are people lining up and say, well, wait, Me Too, Me Too, Me Too. And
speaking of Me Too, El Salvador and Guatemala have said, well, wait a minute, Mr. President, if you're thinking of granting this to Honduras, we want the same for our country.
Yeah, Me Too.
The Me Too has already begun.
Exactly. And Grace, it goes right back to what I've been screaming from the beginning. He is doing this on purpose. The results that you and I see, the disastrous results, what you and I think are disastrous results, I think he knows this. He's not ignorant. He's not a fool. Obama is not a fool. I think he knows. You and I figured it out in 5 seconds what the results would be. Surely, with all of his strategizing and all the people around him, they figured it out. They've got to know.
And you know what they're counting on? They're counting on the continued passivity of the American people.
Yeah.
And that's why it's very important to show them that we're not going to be passive. I'm impressed with folks, for example, like the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, who is taking, he's the governor, is taking matters into his own hands, and he's sending members of the National Guard to the border.
Right.
And he's just, unilateral action. And we, the people, have to stand up, and we have to do it across this great land. So we're going to have to give him a black eye on this, and the pressure is going to have to mount. What's interesting, Carl, is this. There are 2 sources of weakness now in this presidency that we can exploit. One is African Americans are really upset at the president on immigration.
They are. They're turning on him in vast numbers all across America.
All across America. And if that continues to happen, that is the key wedge, because without African American support, anything will be possible after that. Because that is the one thing that is really continuously holding him up, because many don't want any kind of vast astronomical race tensions that might ensue. For example, if there's a real push to impeach him. But if African Americans finally turn on him, and if they recognize this one simple fact, I really want to speak now for one moment to every African American out there who is listening and who may have previously supported President Obama. He is destroying the African American population in this country.
Yeah.
Because the influx of illegal immigrants is going to put all of the needs of African Americans at the very back of the line. It's going to increase unemployment among the African American community, and it's already sky high.
Yeah.
And what it's also going to do is you now have African Americans who are not the key minority in this country.
Right.
Because they're being outpopulated.
Right.
And so the Democrats, what African Americans have not fully grasped, is that Democratic policies, by supporting abortion, which leads to a high proportion of abortions among blacks.
Absolutely.
And by supporting illegal immigration, they are decimating the African American population. If you have any sense of true regard for your fellow black brother or sister, you must take a stand against this man, because he's not your friend. I'm your friend. He's not your friend.
That's right. Dr. Grace is your friend. Carl Gallups is your friend. Obama is not your friend, Black America. Please hear us. Listen, Dr. Alita King was on my show a couple of weeks ago. That's Martin Luther King's Jr.'s niece, as you know, Dr. Grace. She was on my show for 30 minutes. She said the same thing you just said. She said that abortion was born in racism, continues in racism. The purpose of it is to destroy the black population. And she says you need to quit supporting these liberals and these Democrats and Obama and these guys that are pushing abortion, because it is for the purpose of decimating the black population. Listen, I have another anecdotal story for you, Dr. Grace. A good friend of mine who is an African American, who belonged to an extremely left-wing African American organization and group. He was just asked to speak at a large African American assembly of people, and I'm having to be a little nebulous here because he hasn't given me permission to give all the names and everything. But he said he told them he was not going to go speak because he did not want to go speak to this huge group of liberal or African Americans who he said he knew were huge supporters of Obama, because this guy can't stand Obama now. They assured him, said, "Oh no, you come speak. Don't worry about that at all." So he went and he spoke, and he said this huge group of prominent African Americans in America couldn't stand Obama. Now that's a huge shift, Dr. Grace.
It is a growing shift, because you know what? They understand this. Charity begins at home.
Yeah.
And many of them supported him, thinking that their own individual circumstances were going to be vastly improved.
Right.
And instead, the opposite has resulted.
Right.
Employment among the African Americans is sky high. And you know what this illegal immigration influx is going to do? Let me say it in one clear sentence.
Say it.
It's going to bury the African American population.
You're
them.
You're absolutely right. It's already doing it. But listen, we've got to take our first time out, Dr.